When your collage is completed, after you have seen me to have help printing or make sure you save a copy and then do the save as that I'll show you in a minute, and we can print it later. But when you are finished with your collage and ready to move on to the line drawing portion, there's a few things that you need to do to prepare your collage first. So you'll notice that in my layers palette, I've got lots of layers, and this will be a problem for the next step. So I will need to compress them into one. So the first thing that you want to do is come over to your layers menu. Again, if that's not visible, go to Window and click on Layers and it will pop up. You can also get to your layers through over here, but I prefer to do most of my layers over with the layers so I can see what's happening. So you click on the Layers menu and choose Flatten Image. Discard hidden layers, that's fine. What it will do, if you have hidden layers that are invisible, it will just get rid of them because they're not visible anyway. So you can hit cancel and go and make them visible if you want to, or just hit OK, which is fine for me. And you'll see that now my entire collage has been compressed into a background document. I immediately want to go choose File and Save As, and navigate to your folder within the GDIM drive. This is my folder within the GDIM drive, and I'm going to put it in the correct folder, and I'm going to call this one Collage Line, and keep it as a .psd document is perfect. So if it's not a .psd, make sure it says Photoshop. Do not delete the .psd. If you accidentally do, make sure you type in .psd and hit save. What this will do is save a second copy of your collage, and I'll just go show you real quick in my folder what that should look like, because now you'll have two copies, and that is the easiest way to make sure that you don't mess up your original collage. It's always a great idea to have that original one without the layers flattened so that I could go back and make changes later. You never know when you're going to want to use your art again. So now I have Collage Line. So go back to Photoshop, and the next thing you'll want to do is decide which area you're going to draw and crop down your drawing or your collage so that you have just that area to draw. I do not recommend drawing your whole collage. It usually takes more time than we have for this project. So you go to the crop tool, which is up in your selection tools, and you'll notice the new crop tool in CS6 immediately puts a grid around the outside, and we can just grab those corners and pull them in. We're going to have to get used to this jumpiness. CS5 didn't do this, so if you use CS5, you'll just have to get used to things moving around on you. And then what I'm looking for is an area with some interesting shapes and outlines, but not too much detail. I wouldn't want to maybe zoom down and, and just crop it down to, the pickle area, because that would be a lot of detail to have my drawing relied on. So I'm going to look for an area that has some interesting shapes, definitely a variety of the objects from your collage. There's really no minimum. Remember, you had to use at least 5 pictures for your collage, but really for how far you crop it down is based on what you're going to want for your final vector to look like. So pick kind of a favorite area of your collage for sure. And once you get it cropped to just where you want it, I think I'm going to move this line a little over so I don't have that line over here of the edge of the jar. And then if you like it, you can hit the check mark. If you don't, you can hit the cancel. I like it. And remember, this is my cropped version, so I can immediately just do Command S and have it save the updated version. And then you're going to add a new layer. And the easiest way to do that is to come to your layer palette and click the little new page, new layer button. You can also do that through new layer on your layers menu or new layers up here. Remember, Photoshop likes to have lots of different ways so that each person can find their own workflow and what works for them. So you want to make sure that you don't do any of your drawing in your background layer. The best way to do that is to come down to the background layer. You want to double click this little padlock and push OK. And now it's not a background, it's a layer. And now I can push this padlock. And what you'll see is it will not let me do anything in that layer. It will warn me immediately. this is a necessary step to lock your background layer. If any of your drawing goes in that layer, it is quite a bear, pun intended, to remove it. So I click back up onto my top layer, layer 1. And you've got your paintbrush tool over here. It's the second tool in the second little chunk of tools. For this, you want to just use a pretty basic paintbrush. You don't want to get too wild and crazy, and you want to use black. So you can hit the D key, and that will automatically fill in your default foreground and background colors, or you can just hit this little button here, and it will make sure that you have black for your foreground. That way you will be painting in black. If you have some unusual details that overlap, see me after you get started and we can look at doing another layer and maybe doing yours in pieces. But the most effective for this step is to do all black, use a variety of line widths, and really capture some of the interesting shapes, but you don't want to fill in or shade in anything. So when I have my paintbrush, I can go up to the top of the control palette and click on the paintbrush icon up here. I can change the size, I can change the hardness. You might want a middle to harder brush, so you know the harder turned up, or choose one of these harder brushes. The softer brushes, again, give you a little bit of a different look, and you'll see when we get it over into a vector, it's going to really clean it up anyway and make the edges pretty sharp and crisp. So you might as well just start with a nice hard brush. I discourage you from using, at this point for this project, any of the kind of very textured or crazy brushes that Photoshop has. There will be other projects where you can use those, but for now they're really not the best thing. You want a basic round brush. And all of this is good, opacity up, so all of the defaults are perfectly fine. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start outlining on my layer 1 some of my interesting shapes. Make sure you're using your graphic tablets. You will draw and trace these much, much, much better than you will with a mouse. And the outlining doesn't have to be exactly perfect, because I'm going to take it in. So get it as close as you can. Again, you're creating a new piece of artwork now based off of this one. So it doesn't have to be exact. You're not copying the exact thing. You're getting the gist of it. Again, no fill in. So, and look, that's a little bit too big. So I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to undo. You can go to Edit, Undo, or Command Z to undo. And I'm going to get a smaller brush. You can either go back up to your menu, or you can right-click in your document and turn down your brush size. This works very well in this technique if you use a variety of brush sizes, because what that gives you is a variety of line width and line weight. And you can use this to create some depth. So, you know, in a picture, if something is smaller, then it implies that it's farther away from you. If it's smaller and blurrier, if it's larger and kind of crisper, then you know maybe it's a little bit closer to you. So maybe for the nose, I would bump it up a little higher than the 20 point I had last time. For the eyes. And again, notice I am not filling in or shading anything. This is a line drawing, and it's really an outline drawing. If you fill in, you know, if I were to go in and color in these nostrils black at this point, it would really just make it harder for me later, because then I would kind of be stuck with those black. To check your drawing, you can go to the visibility of your background layer and make it invisible, and it doesn't really look like much yet, but that can show me places where maybe I'm missing. You do want to be careful. Illustrator has a gap option that can close some of the gaps for us, but big gaps will really give you a hard time. So you do want to make sure that your lines connect to each other. So you just want to continue along, and again, change that line width. Experiment if you have to. You can always Command Z. And you know, this is a fuzzy panda, so maybe my lines are too straight. You certainly do not have to have straight lines. You want nice clean lines, but they don't have to be straight lines. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of how you might get started. If you are starting to get a lot of drawing on top and you notice that it gets harder, or like here where I'm drawing black on black, it might be a little tricky when I get down here into the detail areas. I can click onto my lower layer, and unlock it for just a moment and turn down the opacity of my lower layer. And what that will do is allow me to see both my layer on top and my layer on the bottom. And so it's up to you. If you want to turn the opacity all the way up and straight trace it, you can. But for those areas that might be tricky to see black on black, I can turn down the opacity. Then I'm immediately going to go and lock it again and switch to layer 1. This is where people will accidentally draw in their lower layer, and it's basically buried there once it's there. And we have to use some of the tools to try and extract it, and it usually doesn't come out very pretty. So please remember to follow the directions and create that separate layer and complete your line drawing. And I would definitely want to think about some of the background here. Even though there's not too many details, I could come into the background, and maybe for this I would use a slightly softer brush. And then I'm going to come into the background and maybe draw some of these more abstract shapes. This will, again, when you turn it into a vector, you will have all of these areas enclosed. You don't have to worry about the outside as much, but again, you want to go back in and make sure that you're closing down those shapes so that when you color them in Illustrator, you have the whole shape instead of the color bleeding where you don't want it to. Okay, so I would work my way around here and get the details I want. If there's something like maybe this pickle really doesn't work in the finished drawing, you don't have to draw everything that you see here, but you want to make sure that you crop an area that you're going to be pretty happy with drawing. So there you go. That is the next step in the collage to vector. So this would be step 7, this is step 5. We're not quite that far. So we're step 5, which is Demo, Photoshop, Crop, Collage, and Save As. Again, we already did our Save As. If for some reason you don't remember to, do not save over your original collage. You might want it. You will definitely need it for your portfolio. So remember to do a Save As and just change the name. If you add the word line to the end, then it's very easy to find it later when we take it into Illustrator. So I'm going to click Save, and yep, I'll go ahead and replace it because I know it's the one that I want because it's my collage line. So there you go. Happy line drawing. Let me know if I can help.